for a Grand Prix that I have ever seen in the whole of my life. He's out of the race! He's out of the race! Oh my goodness, this is fantastic! And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 5 of the 2021 Formula 1 Downforce radio podcast, Maximum Downforce. And before we get underway to run over the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, just a quick word to say that everyone at Downforce UK is deeply saddened to hear of the passing of Max Mosley, former F1 FIA president and co-owner of March Formula 1 team. Anyway, let's get into the Monaco Grand Prix. And joining me, as always, Chris Kavaney, Harry Parkhouse and Ryan Ferris. Guys, it was a fantastic weekend. Max Verstappen dominated the Grand Prix after several issues for the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. Chris, overall the weekend, I've seen reports from many people saying that they didn't enjoy the Grand Prix. They said that it was a bit of a poor race. I actually quite enjoyed it in terms of a Grand Prix at Monaco. I thought it was quite enjoyable. Just give me your thoughts on the Grand Prix.
They're wrong. Monaco Grand Prix is always fun. You've got to love seeing cars going flat out anywhere, but let alone in a city like Monaco with the spectacle, the glamour that comes with Monaco. It's just one of those. You can't have it off the calendar because it also brings a different challenge. You've got all these design circuits, these Tilke circuits and what have you, but then you have this tight street. You know, it's something, an extra twist in the tail of the championship, which this one certainly did bring a twist in the tail, which we'll obviously get onto. But in terms of in general excitement, I can understand why people could have sort of seen it being quite meh. I don't know, but of sorts. To be fair, that the best part was seeing Serena Williams struggling to wave the flag. I mean, she's held a tennis racket before. I'm sure she can hold a flag and wave that about. But in general, I thought it was quite a good Grand Prix. I thought, especially with the championship implication.
And Harry, it was Max Verstappen who took the Grand Prix win, his second of 2021, I believe the 11th or 12th of his career overall. And overall, I think Red Bull will be extremely happy with this weekend. They've taken the lead in the Drivers' Championship by 4 points. They've taken the lead in the Constructors' Championship by just a single point. How do you think they will be looking to move on from this Grand Prix?
Yeah, it was an absolutely huge weekend for Red Bull. I think that the package that they brought, Mercedes from the get-go, they didn't look like they enjoyed the track at all around Monaco, especially Hamilton. In qualifying, he looked off the pace. Bottas was really the only one who got going in qualifying, and around Monaco it's absolutely vital. And the Red Bulls showed that even with Perez down in ninth, I believe he qualified, if you put him on the right strategy, they left him out with the overcut. It was a very well thought out plan from Red Bull, and I believe Aston Martin did it as well with Vettel before, and then Perez jumped all three of them, Gasly, Hamilton and Vettel. And I think that the only real thing that you could maybe be negative about if you're Red Bull is that Perez wasn't on the podium. He was chasing Dan Lando for a lot of the race, but obviously Monaco, it's going to be a hard place to overtake. But I'm pretty sure that if you would have said to Perez before the race, starting P9, that he would get P4, Verstappen with a win, then Red Bull would have taken that easily. And next week, or the week after, is Baku, another street circuit, but it does add a completely different element to Monaco with that long straight down, obviously the back start-finish straight. So that will probably tend to see Mercedes a bit higher up and quicker. You would imagine Hamilton and Verstappen, the fight again would resume. Obviously Hamilton completely off the pace this weekend, but Red Bull as a whole, you would feel this is the year for Red Bull. Verstappen taking the lead of his first championship in any car, I believe any car championship. It's Verstappen's first time leading a championship. So he's going to have a lot of confidence going into Baku. Red Bull having confidence in Perez as well. You look at the team radios afterwards of Perez, of course, Albon, he was up there when he was with Red Bull, but the way that Horner treats Perez seems completely different to the likes of Gasly and Albon. He treats him like he is a Verstappen, and that they do have genuine care for him. And as a team, it seems to be getting ever stronger, and Mercedes should be worried.
Now, Ryan, like Harry just touched on, a poor weekend for the Mercedes-Benz Formula 1 team, and overall not their strongest weekend in Formula 1. But Mercedes definitely had a poor day at the office, and the first thing I want to touch on with Mercedes is that there's three individual points. is Toto Wolff came out and said that Mercedes will only be bringing minor tweaks to their 2021 package in order to focus on the future with 2022. Do you think that with their current position in the championship fight with Mercedes and Red Bull, do you think they can afford to bring in no more updates to the rest of this championship?
I think they need to bring minor updates because as long as if Red Bull are going to be making improvements with the car, then Mercedes is going to need to make improvements with the car. But the Mercedes that we've seen so far this season hasn't been the absolute dog that we saw in pre-season testing. It's still a very competitive car. So I feel it's still going to be, once you've left the street circuit venues, I think it's going to still be normal service resumed in that Mercedes will be somewhat back towards dominance. But it's going to be interesting coming into Baku, which is still another street circuit where Red Bull tend to do quite well as well.
And obviously the championship order, as I mentioned, has now changed. Max Verstappen is now leading the championship order by 4 points. He won the Grand Prix with Carlos Sainz Jr. taking his third podium in Formula One, as well as Lando Norris taking his third podium in Formula One. The two old McLaren teammates on the podium for the first time together. Sergio Perez was just off of Lando Norris to claim fourth place, with Sebastian Vettel taking fifth with his Aston Martin, the German's best result with the team in his time there. Pierre Gasly was sixth, beating Lewis Hamilton in seventh, who also claimed the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, and also a new track record for Monaco. Lance Stroll came from 11th to finish 8th with a strong strategy from the Aston Martin team, with Esteban Ocon 9th and Antonio Giovinazzi taking Alfa Romeo's first points of the season, just in front of Kimi Raikkonen up ahead. So as we take a look up and down the grid, like I just mentioned, Lewis Hamilton, really not a very good day at the office, Chris. He came out and said, I believe afterwards, he described his car long as hell. And obviously with the short and slow corners of Monaco and the fact that you need to be able to turn the car properly, that is going to be a factor which is harsh on a Mercedes car. But afterwards, I saw an interview, and many people have been criticizing Hamilton for this, is Hamilton effectively in some interviews came out and said that the team win and lose together. But in other interviews, Hamilton said that he had not learned anything from this Grand Prix. And on the other hand, Mercedes had to learn a lot. Do you think it's a mixture of a lack of driver pace and car pace, or would you purely blame one party?
I don't really know. I mean, when you look at Valtteri, he got up there, didn't he? He got up there, and Hamilton didn't. But forgetting that drivers have form. You know, drivers can do something amazing, and even can equally do meh. You look at even Lewis Hamilton could do that. Even Ayrton Senna had those days. Even any of these top drivers had these sorts of days. So it's one of those blips, and they knew going into this Grand Prix that this would be one of their possibly weaker turnouts because of their long wheelbase car around the street circuit, and they knew equally because of that other cars would catch up. And what we also should remember. Just one race in the 20, how many race in the calendar? 23? 23 race calendar?
23, yeah.
So I think they shouldn't really be too upset because there is a long season ahead. There's still a long way to go. Stuff will happen. But I think what Hamilton was saying there was probably a bit too much, really. I mean, it's compared to his teammate, Valtteri, he got screwed over. But he was running all right. I think he should just take it on the chin and move on to the next one.
And Valtteri Bottas was running in second place, arguably pushing Max Verstappen, many claiming that Verstappen was cruising, as it did appear with Verstappen easily able to pull out a 3-second gap. But when Valtteri came into the pit stop and moved in, all three of his tyres were changed, and then the front right, the wheel gun would not take the nut off. And to this point, we're now recording at 7 o'clock the next evening. Mercedes still cannot get that wheel nut off. So realistically, we take a look at the close nature of this championship. Could that single wheel nut cost Mercedes a drivers' or constructors' championship?
Well, it's huge for both because obviously Bottas wouldn't have expected him to be in a championship fight even going into Monaco, but he definitely isn't now. And having the Mercedes up there running in second, that's a crucial 18 points missed out for Mercedes today. And you think that if you look at Baku in 2 weeks, it's, like I said before, it's a track that suits Red Bull. If Red Bull can gain momentum as Mercedes not doing any major upgrades or any minor upgrades, this could be the season and the turning point for Red Bull to kick on. And that one wheel nut, which as you said is still on, which is remarkable. The tyre is still on the car. It's Bottas is one of the, if not the unluckiest drivers I've seen in Formula One for a long time. And while he does perform in the Mercedes some weeks, like this week, he was by far quicker than Hamilton in many sessions. That could be majorly damaging to Mercedes. Although it's nothing due to COVID still and the restrictions, but it still is a long season. There's a lot to play for still.
Ferrari went from pre-season testing. Some of the mechanics had their head in their hands, looking extremely worried with the pace of the car. They come to Monaco. We've noticed throughout this season they've had good low-speed corner pace, and their car has been fantastic in the low-speed corners compared to Ferrari being the team that's known for speed. It's kind of ironic that the team that they best perform so far at Monaco. This sudden upturn in pace, obviously Mattia Binotto openly stating that he was using the blank point in the regulations about these bendy wings that we've been seeing so much in the headlines about. Do you think Ferrari can continue this upturn in form to the point where they could challenge McLaren further for third in the championship, or maybe even be knocking on the door of the front runners by season's end?
I definitely believe that there is a fight on between Ferrari and McLaren, because we've seen over the course of race weekends that there have been places where Ferrari have been strong. I think where the major thing is the fact that Carlos Sainz has managed to get to grips with that Ferrari as quick as he has, which I think could be damaging towards McLaren, where they've got Ricardo, who's not finding his feet as quick as everyone would think. So, yeah, I think there's definitely the potential that we could see Ferrari eventually leapfrog McLaren. Whether or not we'd see them going further up the field and having more performances like we saw at the weekend, I'm not quite sure. Obviously, we're coming into Baku, another street circuit, which could possibly favour them. However, there is that very long straight that could affect them, but it'll be interesting to see.
Now, Chris, I know that you were very intrigued to talk about this point with Ferrari, the crash of Charles Leclerc, arguably the biggest talking point of the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. What are your thoughts and feelings on it?
I'm going to steal the mic for a few minutes, if that's okay. I am a big Ferrari fan, as you all know. I have a Ferrari flag, I have Ferrari shirts, I have Ferrari stuff at home. I live and breathe them, and this hurt. I'll rewind the clocks back a bit to the 31st of March 2019, which was the Bahrain Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc was in front for the majority of the race and held his own versus Lewis, and then what happens is turbo gives up, and everyone had their heads up and their hands was like, no, Jesus, why? And then with 10 laps to go, Lewis Hamilton takes the lead. And like that would have been Charles' first Ferrari win in just only his second race, I believe. And that was like a punch to the stomach. Come back to now. He has this chance of the sudden pace of the Ferrari and has the provisional pole, and it's all looking beautiful. And then with 30 seconds to go, hits the wall. And we're all like, no, yes, because he had provisional pole, but was with this gearbox hold, and we're all in limbo in this purgatory state. Like, what's going to happen to this car? And then the information came out that the gearbox was fine. So everyone's like, yes, a Monegasque is on pole in Monaco. Brilliant. A Ferrari's on pole in this turbo era where they, in the latter stages, have been atrocious, I will admit. And then it comes to the Sunday, and we're still getting reports that the gearbox is fine. And then they go on to do the warm-up lap, and you hear on the radio Charles Leclerc literally going, "Oh, no, no." And I tell you what, that was like Indiana Jones on ripping the heart out, Kalima, and just poof. Literally. And it was just awful to hear. And it was just so tragic. And it's sort of was so hard to take, and even for Charles it was hard to take. You could tell the pain on him. He still hasn't finished a race at Monaco. He will get his chance when he's about 40 probably, but he will get his chance. But it's just such a gut punch this weekend, and there were moments where I just didn't want to watch the race because I was so upset to hear this. You could tell this is a bit non-biased, but you know. But yeah, what I will say is this though. He did that error himself. He hit the wall. He put himself out of the race. So it's not like in Bahrain where his turbo gave up on him. He actually caused this crash and put himself out effectively. And secondly, it showed what a great man he is because he stuck around at the end of that race. He could have gone to his flat, which is half a mile away from the circuit, but no, he stuck around. Cheer on Ferrari. Cheer on Carlos Sainz, and he got his second place, and he was there to congratulate with him, and he was there with the team. You see something with this young lad, you know, with this young, great guy, and you see the human in him and the heart that he has. So, in general, it was hard to take, but you saw something else about him as well. And now I finished. So, I've finished that, and my beard has grown.
And I suppose realistically as well, that does obviously show the separation between Leclerc and drivers of the older ages, such as Kimi Räikkönen just going to his yacht in 2005 or 2006, whenever it was.
Yeah. The fact that it was the bitter pill to swallow, but he stuck around. He was and it was just painful. And I literally just watched on my phone a video that they did yesterday. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc talking about the recap of the race, and Carlos Sainz was saying about, it's hard to do this video with this guy next to me who didn't get to start and all the pain, but Charles was very graceful, very humble about it. So, yeah, overall, a big mistake caused by him, put him out of the race, but he showed how good a man he is at the same time.
And Harry, on the other side of the garage with Carlos Sainz, as Chris just mentioned, he did end up scoring his first podium with Ferrari. And realistically, the opening few rounds have been a bit tough on Sainz when compared to his teammate, because his teammate already has, before the season, 17 races, which is effectively in the same car. And it does look to me now, is Sainz back to where we saw him last year?
I think absolutely. I think going back to the point, I think with Ricardo as well, Ricardo hasn't found his feet in that McLaren yet, and going into the Ferrari, especially the Ferrari of last year, you know how unstable it was, and it was not a good car at all. Well, it's not the car that Ferrari wanted it to be. It was not going to challenge for these podiums consistently, and not going to challenge for the race win. But obviously, they found stuff with these low-speed corners, and Monaco and probably Baku will help them severely. And with a driver lineup of Charles and Carlos finding his feet, probably the quickest out of all the drivers who have made moves in the off-season. You look at Alonso struggling, Vettel struggled up until Monaco with Aston Martin, and obviously Ricardo, as mentioned before. But Sainz, I remember Brundle saying during, I believe, the Grand Prix, I think it was saying that Verstappen's teammates, Carlos Sainz is the best one he's had in Formula One. And you look back at that and you say, well, that's not too far from the truth. Ricardo, obviously, he was scoring podiums. He was getting the wins around your Monacos and stuff like that, but he wasn't near the consistency levels that Red Bull wanted. And obviously, he left and hasn't really found his feet in McLaren since leaving Renault. But back onto Carlos Sainz, if he continues the form of fighting like that, because in qualifying, he could have been on par. He was on for a good lap until obviously the Leclerc crash. But having a dynamic of Leclerc and Sainz, they clearly seem to be, well, good friends. They seem to have a good relationship within the team, which is something that, obviously, as much as I do love Seb, it wasn't around last year. The environment wasn't a very nice place to be in. And I feel like Ferrari are making a massive step in the right direction in bringing in Sainz. Usually you would say that a Ferrari would go for probably a junior driver like Leclerc was. You think it might end up probably halting Schumacher's progress maybe in the sport if Sainz continues this form that he is showing earlier on. And obviously the gap between the two drivers now in the standings, I believe, is only 1 or 2 points. So you look at the start that Sainz had, and he was getting slandered a bit. To be within that close of his teammate, especially someone who has world championship potential like Charles Leclerc, I think it shows how well Sainz has adjusted and the fact that Ferrari are on a good turning point.
And as Harry just touched on, Ryan, with McLaren, we'll talk about the driver's form first of all, but I know that I've seen from your reaction that you absolutely loved this, or to my knowledge at least, the McLaren Golf livery. What a design that McLaren incorporated to celebrate their history with the oil company and to celebrate their future in the sport. Just why do you think they decided to do it for Monaco? And overall, how did they break this sudden curse of special liveries always performing badly?
Well, I think it was obviously Monaco because it's one of the oldest races on the calendar, and I think it was the Monaco Grand Prix, if I remember correctly, was McLaren's first ever race when they first came to Formula One. So I think it was a good way to do this livery. Obviously, Golf sponsored McLaren back in the day when they were originally in papaya orange. And yeah, I think as a one-off livery, I thought it was very good. I think people probably forget about the livery a bit down the line, but nonetheless, it was still a stunning livery. And yeah, I think for once we managed to have a special livery that didn't draw a curse when, well, it seemed other teams were getting cursed instead.
So Lando Norris scored a podium which he will remember forever in terms of it was his first podium at Monaco and his third podium with McLaren and in Formula One. But do you believe that this podium was Norris establishing himself as the head of McLaren in their driver lineup?
I mean, it could be. I mean, when you consider that he lapped his teammate, that often is a sign that you are establishing yourself as the guy. That certainly would help him on that vein. But the whole thing is that he's been on the front foot of that McLaren a heck of a lot more. Like beforehand, I mentioned this at Imola when we did this podcast at Imola, when Daniel Ricciardo was some 20-something off the pace, and I even said, what's the chances of this happening again or keeping on persisting? And it is persisting. Whether it's just down to Ricardo not getting to grips with it or not, I don't know. I mean, if it's something else, then he's in for a spot of bother, because Lando is definitely in a groove right now. Definitely in a groove. But I will say this. I did say earlier that drivers have form. We have to see what happens when Lando has a problem, or Lando, say, either he drives slow or his car goes out. Then it is onto the head and shoulders of Ricardo. We've seen Sainz do it this weekend when Leclerc went out. It was on Sainz's shoulders to bring back the points for Ferrari. What happens in the future when Norris gets out for some reason and it's on Ricardo's shoulders only? What will happen then? That's going to be the telltale regarding who's number one or not.
And Harry, the simple question I ask you is Daniel Ricciardo done in Formula One? I know that might seem like quite an overreaction, but he's moved team. He's jumped ship to McLaren in order to attempt to find this new place. And it's a question which has been on my mind for a while, because in terms of Ricardo at this team, and obviously it's very early doors, but Lando Norris is establishing himself. Let's face it, with the current performance, he is better than Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren. And with Ricardo on a 3-year contract, I think he's safe with the team. I don't think the team would cut the contract. But beyond that point, do you think this could be Daniel Ricciardo's final team in Formula One?
Final team, maybe, but in terms of being a finished driver, I'm not sure. I don't think so. You look last year when he was in the Renault, he was on the podium. Obviously, the Renault it's not going to be the quickest car, but he was still on the podium. And he was still fighting up there. He was quicker for the majority of the year than Esteban Ocon, who now Alonso's come into that car, albeit might be not as good as it probably was compared to the rest of the field last year. But Esteban Ocon is absolutely dominating Fernando Alonso. And Ricardo, I think when you go to a new team, especially a team like McLaren, who are constantly finding pace and finding their way up the grid from the very back, with that in general, it's always going to be difficult to adjust to because it's going to be a completely different car in which he's used to driving. And he's had to change a lot of his driving style, I think, this year to suit that McLaren and to try and extract as much pace out of him and out of the car as he possibly can. And I think that Lando Norris is criminally underrated within the sport, personally. I think that someone who's doing that at such a consistent level in the McLaren, he was doing it consistently in his first year in the sport. I think that, obviously, you looked in the junior battles when he was with George Russell, he wasn't necessarily on the same level constantly as George Russell, but he's come up into F1 and he showed that he is worthy of the McLaren seat, a historic team within the sport. He's worthy of that seat and he's worthy of getting on the podium and potentially in the future even winning races. So once you go into that new environment with a teammate who's been in that car for several years now and is thoroughly used to the background of McLaren and used to driving the car, I think it's always going to be a difficult task. And people, I would say, overestimated what Daniel Ricciardo has to do this year. He's still scored a handful of points, a decent amount of points for the McLaren team, and I don't think it's been necessarily as bad as people are making it out to be. I think that qualifying, obviously, it's massive around Monaco. Once you start there, I think you start 12th or maybe 13th, around that sort of area, it's unlikely he's going to score points unless there's a major incident up ahead. Obviously, we had Leclerc and Bottas, but that wasn't enough for him to score. And his pace wasn't on it, and he got stuck in a lot of traffic, and he couldn't get past because it was Monaco. Is that necessarily the excuse that he can use every time? Absolutely not. But if this form is to continue, say, into Baku, and then afterwards throughout the year, then it becomes more of a concern. Only the start of the year in a new environment, I think that it's harsh on Ricardo to say that he's a finished driver, but obviously, you mentioned the deal that he had. This very well could be the last team he drives for, because if this form continues, then I don't see why any team is going to want to take him over, say, a young driver coming through, or maybe even the ones that they've got now. And there's not really many options open for Ricardo if he was to get sort of the boot from McLaren, I guess.
I just want to say before we go any further, Will, you came out swinging on that, saying that he's finished. That is quite a bold claim, I'll say, but now you can have it back.
Well, technically, Chris, I said, is he finished? So there's a bit of a loophole in that.
I guess, but and on to like what Harry said, he may be getting points, but there's a difference between getting points and finishing like a lap behind a teammate. You can two of you could be third and fourth, which is fine, but if you're in fourth place and you've been lapped by your third teammate who's in third, then that's still a concern, no matter if you got points or not.
And especially when it's so consistent being outperformed. Pierre Gasly at Red Bull, for example, I know that's quite a harsh comparison in terms of Red Bull and McLaren, quite different environments, but Pierre Gasly was consistently being lapped by Max Verstappen, Austria and Hungary, two examples that I can name off the top of my head. And he was booted out of that team. And don't get me wrong, to the people listening, I just want to clarify, in no way do I believe that Daniel Ricciardo is done in Formula One as it stands, because it's so early on in the season. But realistically, we have to take a look at his performance. And being lapped by Lando Norris to the point where Norris waved to him as he went past, whether that's just Norris being Norris, we've seen him wave to the likes of Verstappen and Sainz in the past. But when it gets to the point when your teammate is so easily able to just wave to you during a Grand Prix, not even after, not even in the practice session. He waved to him during the Grand Prix when he was going up Beau Rivage. That's not something that Ricardo should be proud and smiling about this weekend.
No, I was just saying definitely not. It shouldn't be a thing. But I can that wave wasn't a banterous thing. I think it was just a thank you, because no one likes being held up at Monaco, even if it is your teammate.
Well, Ryan, what's your opinion on this situation with Ricardo and Norris?
Well, I think being a McLaren supporter, I'm a bit disappointed with Ricardo. I was sort of hoping that coming into Monaco, obviously he had the bold statement of "I own these streets" on the back of his helmet, and everything. I was hoping that I was going to see some sort of turnaround, seeing as this was the track that, out of all the tracks on the calendar, Ricardo scored the most points at in his career. And I mean, when he was at Renault, he wasn't in that car. He didn't get straight into that car and was quick straight away. He struggled to start off with in that Renault, because he'd gone from the Red Bull that was very good and comfortable under braking and very predictable under braking, to a Renault that didn't react the same way that the Red Bull did. So he wasn't confident enough to pull off these do or die moves that he became very famous for at Red Bull. And I think we're very much seeing something similar, although on a much larger scale, at McLaren, where he's gone from a Renault that he's now become very comfortable with and was able to drive to the limit comfortably and get podiums with, to a car that feels very much foreign to him. And like he said, once again, he's having to change around his driving style. And I think maybe come next season, when it comes to the new regs, McLaren can then start to design the car so it suits his driving style a little bit more.
Anyway, gentlemen, stepping away from modern Formula One and looking back on the years gone by, one of my favourite segments, as you guys know, and I say this sentence every time, but I really do enjoy taking a look back at the history of the sport and everything that's happened in a bit more of a fun and quizzical way. May 24th is the day we are recording, on the Monday after the Grand Prix, and obviously around this date it's always the Monaco Grand Prix, and that is the similar thing today. And in 2001, a couple of teams decided to test some new parts on their front wing, and obviously teams always looking for new aerodynamic devices and different things to have, but it was designed front wing attachments to give them extra downforce, and this was in 2001. And there were two teams which were, testing them. Now, I just want to ask you guys, do you know which two teams were sent out or not sent out, but were investigated for this?
Interesting. I just have to remember which teams there were in 2001. That's a quiz in itself.
I remember Arrows running some weird front wings at some point.
Were Jaguar around at the time?
Jaguar were around, yeah.
Like that. I mean, yes, of course they were. Of course they were. Or Minardi, that could be them. You never know. I'll guess one of them's Minardi.
It's not the funny H wing that they had on the front noses at one point, is it?
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, it could
be anything.
Oh, that's a shout. Yeah, that's a shout. I'd say, you know what? I'm going to ride on that Arrow string. I'm going to say Minardi and Arrows are the two teams.
Okay, and Ryan?
I want to say Arrows, if it is the H wing thing, because my knowledge of the early 2000s just goes into a mush. It all goes into one, I think. I want to say Arrows, and if it isn't that, and I'm wondering if it's something else, could the other team be Renault?
Well, I know for a fact that it's not Renault, because in 2001 Renault were Benetton, but I understand what you mean. Harry, what's your guess?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I think if I was to take two, I'd go Arrows and maybe Jordan.
Well, Harry, I can actually say that you are the person who is correct in this instance. It was
Really?
Arrows and Jordan both testing these front wing devices.
Ah, I need to look this
I need
up.
to look it up.
Oh my sweet Jesus! It's basically a T-wing in front of the
Exactly.
steering wheel.
But
That is, I mean, early Halo, eh?
yeah, I suppose you could look at it. They were testing an early formation of the Halo.
Yeah, just using downforce on it rather than safety.
Anyway, moving back
Wow.
to modern Formula One, moving back to the Monaco Grand Prix, Harry. Aston Martin, I know that you've been very intrigued by this season so far. We've had numerous conversations about how Racing Point have become Aston Martin. They have finally come out of the blocks. They've had a couple small points finishes, but Vettel 10th, Stroll 8th, brilliant performance from the team to almost, I think, they may have even quadrupled their points. I'm not very good at maths, but they've certainly increased it by a major amount.
Yeah, they have. I think that to be a successful team in Formula One, you need both drivers on the pace. And I'm a massive Sebastian Vettel fan. I've followed him for God knows how many years in the sport, and see him move to get a better opportunity in a new team was something that I was extremely excited for. And then seeing the first four races and the performances that he's put up so far was extremely disappointing to me. But I know deep down that he has the pace to perform on a race weekend. And when we come to a technical track, one where the driver needs to extract the most out of the car they possibly can, Seb is up there. And in qualifying, he could have gone about 2 tenths quicker, maybe, I believe he said on the radio. I doubt that would have made too much of a difference on his starting position. Actually, maybe Paris probably would have overtaken him. But I think that in the race, obviously, the strategy from Aston Martin was superb for both Vettel and Stroll. Leaving Stroll out that long, I think he was only the second last driver to pit Barcelona, and he managed to jump both Ocon and Giovinazzi when he pit to stay out in eighth. And Vettel in fifth, obviously he was helped by Leclerc and Bottas up ahead, but to obviously finish in these high positions, sometimes you do need that extra help, especially when you're in a car that has not looked good at all this season. And they have jumped, I believe, both AlphaTauri and Alpine in the standings now, so they are up to fifth. Obviously, they are still a long way behind the Ferraris and your McLarens for the battle for third and fourth. But if they were to sort of gain momentum from this, and you'd imagine that Baku would be a decent circuit for the Aston Martin if it continues well at a track like Monaco, then I feel that it could potentially be a turning point, especially in Sebastian Vettel's season, because over the team radio at the end, when he did the ring-a-ding-ding at the end, it brought a massive smile to my face, knowing Seb is actually happy back in the cockpit of a car. And at the end of the race, he can actually celebrate a result of his own for once. And he's always had good performances, not always at Monaco, but street circuits he tends to come alive at. And I was optimistic going into Monaco that he could potentially score a ninth or a 10th place finish, maybe get a couple of points. But to see him finishing up in fifth is brilliant. And Lance Stroll as well, you can't deny Lance Stroll. Qualifying, he wasn't the quickest, to be honest. I believe that, well, both Stroll and Vettel were lucky to get through in Q1 anyway, because Sonoda was very close behind Seb, I believe less than 2 thousandths. So they were lucky there, but in terms of the final position, to get a fifth and an eighth around Monaco in a track in which your team now, since joining the sport, have not got a double point score, fifth and eighth is a very good result for Aston Martin, and I think that everyone in the team will be delighted by it and will be delighted to probably go to Baku as well off the back of a performance at a street circuit. And hopefully, now, of course, Seb's overtaken Stroll in the championship after just one race. Hopefully, this will be a sort of a landing point for Seb to maybe kick on and push and try and get this sort of qualifying battle and race battle and bring it back to Lance, because I believe that Lance is still 3-2 in both the race and qualifying. So obviously, getting used to the new car and stuff is a bit different. But I think that if Seb is to get used to this Aston Martin, then a result like this is absolutely perfect for him. And Lance as well, scoring points is good for Aston Martin. And I'm willing them on for the entire season. I truly am.
I think that's probably what I'm going to make the question of the day to the viewers. Is this the beginning of Sebastian Vettel's season? Let us know in the comments on YouTube or on our social media, Downforce Radio. Either way, moving on, we've got the trio of A teams: Aston Martin, Alpine, and AlphaTauri. Oh no, the quad actually of Alfa Romeo as well. Chris, Alpine. We'll touch on these teams quickly because obviously we don't want to repeat ourselves every single week. But Alpine had a really good performance on Ocon's side of the garage. Alonso, not so much. With Alonso being outperformed by Ocon, I believe Alonso is on a 2-year deal. Is this a possibility that whereas Ocon doesn't have a contract for next year and Alonso does, could we actually see Alonso leave the team at the end of the season, but Ocon remain?
I think that'd be very difficult because I think Fernando Alonso was initially brought in as a form of stopgap because of youth development stuff. Someone will have to back me up on this one, but I think Ocon's doing very well. And I tell you now, it's tough to do things on a 1-year contract. I've looked at loads of sports, and when players or drivers are on 1-year contracts, there is an added pressure for you to try and get that either another year or getting a multiple deal. With this pressure put on him, I don't think Alonso. If Alonso goes, then I think there's something odd going on because, I thought he was brought in because they needed an experienced driver because there was a gap in the driver development there in the Renault side of things, or now Alpine, and of course going to 2022, if you have an experienced person with a new car. You won't turn that down, really, no matter who it is, in terms of experience. So I don't think it'll be his last year.
And Ryan, AlphaTauri, similar to Alpine, had one driver a really good race, Pierre Gasly, and on the other side, Yuki Tsunoda, his first time ever driving Monaco. Not the best of outings for the Japanese rookie.
No, and I think it's been really strange for Tsunoda recently. Obviously, he had his technical gremlins in Catalonia, but he came out of the box well to start off with, obviously scoring points in Bahrain, and then it just seems he's gone from, rather than building form, his form's kind of started to go backwards. But then the AlphaTauri generally hasn't been quite as good this season and as everyone thought it was going to be. It looked brilliant in pre-season testing. It almost looked almost on par with the Red Bull because it was similar packaging. But yeah, it's just not. It just doesn't seem to be clicking so well for Tsunoda. I don't know if he's decided, to have a bit of a step back, calm down a bit. And also because it was Monaco, he just wanted to get the car round without crashing it. But yeah, and also, again, his first time. I think hopefully he will find something in the next few races. I hope he does, because he's been quite an entertaining driver to watch at times.
And then obviously Alfa Romeo, once again, Harry, I'm going to say the same thing again. One driver, one good race. The other driver, not so much of a good race. Giovinazzi took Alfa Romeo's first official points in the 2021 Formula One World Championship. Obviously, Kimi did score in Imola, but this is essentially Alfa Romeo's first point on the board in this championship. And Giovinazzi did a very good race in terms of it was only his second race in Monaco. The last time he raced around it, like everyone else, was 2 years ago, unless you're Esteban Ocon or one of the rookies, or Fernando Alonso. But it does show that he is improving.
Yeah, he certainly is improving, and I think he's one that has taken his time in F1 to get up to where he is now. I don't think you look at him in the midfield and you go, wow, that's an exceptional driver. He should be in a top-tier team like a Ferrari. But I feel like with Giovinazzi, he will end up turning into one of those drivers like a Magnussen, who tends to be in like the Hasses, your Renault, stuck with the middle sort of teams and always sort of bouncing around one of them. Maybe because I don't think he has that initial quality to kick on and be a future sort of podium fighter in a proper high-end team, I guess. But on the other side of things, you look at Kimi Räikkönen, and Kimi's getting outfought a lot, especially towards the back end of last season as well. And this season, it's followed suit with Giovinazzi being the stronger driver and looking like he's taken his claim to be the number one driver within the team. Obviously, Raikkonen will have ties from there, and there's obviously the lingering question of when Raikkonen will retire, when will he leave, who will come in for Alfa Romeo. I think that if he was to retire, especially at the end of this year with the new regulations, then it could leave a massive problem for Alfa Romeo, because having that experience in there will help for 2022. But seeing Giovinazzi's performance recently, and especially he was pushing Ocon for a lot of the race, looking for that P9, and that was really the only battle that we managed to see throughout the entire race, apart from the Vettel Gasly and then cutting to Stroll hitting the wall. But it was a good race all in all for Giovinazzi, and the Alfa Romeo, it's never going to be near the likes of where it needs to be. I say the Alpha Tauris, even the Aston Martins now and the Alpines do have the advantage still over the Alfa Romeo. But I think if Giovinazzi can consistently keep it on track, which he's doing a lot more, when at the start of his career he was constantly in the barrier, he's doing a lot more. He's consistently keeping on the track, and he's finding the limit to that car, and he's been in the team for a while now. He could be a very valuable asset to Alfa Romeo for 2022. And I don't see many drivers or many teams changing their drivers for next year. So having Giovinazzi in the squad could be a good thing, and maybe Kimi alongside him too.
And obviously, one last thing I want to touch on before we head on to the inevitable conversation about Haas that we have every week is Williams actually had their 750th Grand Prix, an amazing achievement for a constructor. There's no offense to Williams, there's no real point in having a full-blown discussion about their weekend because it was quite under the radar. Nicholas Latifi had a few rookie mistakes in terms of his first appearance at the Monaco Grand Prix. George Russell getting into Q2 like we expect, but unable to make full use of his qualifying prowess, Chris. It wasn't something which Williams would be shouting home about for a landmark Grand Prix like 750, but with their car, I think the phrase that you'll use is it'll do.
Yeah, it'll do. I mean, actually, considering the qualifying with Latifi, he did make up some places at the beginning to get himself behind George Russell. And those two are pretty much neck and neck the whole way. And so I know around Monaco that's quite easy because one can measure a pace and the other one can't do anything. But he did stick with George Russell, which was very good. And of course, when Russell pitted and then the position swapped back, and then Latifi pitted. In terms of pace, I guess you can be somewhat happy, or is it not much to work off because it's Monaco? That'll do, like you said, sums it up, probably. What done next week, please? Probably. That's what they're thinking.
We've learned recently as well, especially if you're watching the Sky Sports broadcast, is that Williams have gotten to the point where they're so busy in planning the future for the team, where Jos Capito and De Maison, the technical director, are actually living in the same apartment, discussing just across the down the road from Grove, but they are discussing how to improve Williams whilst living together. I think maybe one team that possibly needs to adopt this tactic is Haas, because once again, same narrative, poor season or a poor season, but a poor weekend. But this time, Ryan, it wasn't Mazepin who was making the majority of mistakes, because we've had this narrative throughout the season so far that Mazepin has been off the pace of Schumacher and not very quick in terms of his German rival. But overall, Mick really did have quite a sloppy weekend. I think he crashed in FP1, crashed in FP3, he couldn't compete in qualifying, and after that his weekend was just ruined.
Yeah, it was a bit disappointing for Mick. He did post himself in 14th, I think, in FP3 before having his accident. And the thing is, Mazepin came into this weekend with a different approach, which has turned out to be to have worked for him, because the ongoing joke coming into this weekend was how long will it be until he's in the harbour, and he didn't even touch a barrier this weekend. And I think, to be honest, I think he deserves, a pat on the back for that, because he's kind of starting to do the turnaround of trying to prove that he's not the person that he's led everyone else to believe. And obviously Schumacher having a few moments into the barriers costing him from qualifying. However, he was going well in the race until he, from what I read, had an engine issue that dropped him behind Mazepin. But no, it's disappointing weekend for Schumacher, but to be honest, a good weekend for Mazepin.
I think realistically, with this Grand Prix, the TV directors certainly, obviously, there's been quite a bit of a joke. The 2019 British Grand Prix springs to mind about this, where Hamilton and Bottas were having that ding dong battle. They were about to show the brilliant overtake, and then they cut to the crowd, and the overtake was just completely missed from Hamilton on Bottas. Luckily, we didn't miss the overtake from Bottas, Harry. But since you're the one who brought up this topic, I think we should come to you about this. The F1 community has certainly not let this go. We've seen the likes of the Hamilton and Rosberg crash in 2016 Spain, and the 2010 crash between Webber and Kovalainen in Valencia, immediately to cut to Lance Stroll going over a bump at Monaco. Should Formula One learn from this? And if not, why haven't they?
Well, you look at the fact that people watching, especially on Sky, they're paying money for this broadcast, not necessarily the specific broadcast on Issues Now TV, but they are paying money to watch the race. When you're watching a Monaco Grand Prix, you're not going to expect overtaking. When you get Sebastian Vettel coming out of the pit lane, going toe-to-toe, the only battle we've seen for the entire race with Pierre Gasly, and it cuts to Lance Stroll touching the barrier and going over the curb, a complete moment that not necessarily no one cares about, but not what you want to see at the time. It is not acceptable for the TV directors to do such a thing. I guess it was a mistake, and throughout the whole, even in F2, it hasn't been great. There was many graphic issues that I saw as well, especially when Gasly, I think, was ahead of Hamilton, and they just swapped Gasly and Hamilton's stats, so Gasly looked like a 7-time world champion. It was a mess, to be honest. If you watch a lot of it back, the graphics in general, and not just the cutting away. And I said it before as well, when they tried to show the replay of what happened, it cut again. It was a dismal performance, really, for the TV directors, and it should definitely be brought up a lot more, because if that does happen every week, people are paying money for it, and then it's not worth the enjoyment, I guess, because it just gets cut out and you watch replays. You want to watch the race live, you want to watch them overtake around Monte Carlo, and having that not happen and instead watching Lance Stroll is not what people are paying for.
That's a bit harsh on Lance Stroll. I rather like watching him race.
I think especially as well, because I remember watching the Portuguese Grand Prix, or the weekend, because I watched the entire weekend for once when I had the day off college. And throughout practice, I noticed that every couple minutes, the screen would just go completely blurry and then come back, essentially, like go back to the normal resolution before going blurry about 5 minutes later. And after checking it wasn't my Wi-Fi, or checking there wasn't my connection, which, as many people who know me, is often quite an issue, I went on my phone and I used my 4G. I used a couple of different devices. It was happening throughout, and I'm not sure whether that was just my service provider or F1 TV, but the whole coverage of Formula One and the way it is presented needs to be improved. I think that is the overall solution that we've come to here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, it doesn't take much for you to suddenly notice something awry and suddenly turn on them going, "Oh, that shouldn't be right," because it's certainly one of those situations when it comes to coverage. You make do with what you see in front of you, and no matter how well it looks, you just take it and go, "Oh, okay." I mean, and then when something bad goes wrong, everyone is quick on it, going, "This is fake, yada yada yada." It doesn't take much for them to suddenly have a hiccup. But the one at Monaco was quite the hiccup. I couldn't believe it, really. I remember reading a report somewhere. Someone said it could be they didn't want to show a potential air crash or something like that. That I think is false. I think it's just because they were just stupid.
I think after that, I think that's all we have time for this week's episode of Maximum Downforce. Thank you very much, Ryan, Harry, and Chris, for joining me. And thank you very much to all of you for listening at home. Remember that we do this podcast after every single Formula One Grand Prix to talk about all the news and events that happen at a Grand Prix weekend. And we will see you next in Baku. Remember to take a look at our social media, Downforce Radio on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Facebook, and also downforceradio.uk to listen to the radio station where you can hear this podcast, hear fantastic music, Mike Reed to wake you up in the morning for his breakfast show, and also read all of the news from the world of motorsport. Thank you very much for listening. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you in Baku.
Go, go, go! Anytime